it's very funny because I think my definition has morphed into something different today. But I think originally I had defined innovation as that ability to have breakthrough ideas. However, what I have learned is that it's not just about breakthrough ideas anymore. It's about integration as well. You don't have to just come up with something new. You have to be astute enough. You have to be clever enough. You have to be collaborative enough to understand what else is out there that might help you expedite the solution, and that is integration. And so innovation without integration, today, I'm not so sure works. Now let me tell you why. One of the not-for-profit foundations that we have founded is a program called Healthy Villages. And Healthy Villages was triggered in my mind because I was on a plane in 2009, 2010, and I was reading an article, the content of which is still etched in my memory today, that in our lifetime, 1 billion people will go to their graves prematurely because they never had access to a healthcare worker. 6 million are children who die each year because they didn't have access to clean water or to medication. Now, some people will say, well, just educate more physicians and come up with a novel way of how to expedite that. The problem is, if you look at countries like Ethiopia, there's a population of 100 million people. There are only 2,500 physicians. Now, just to put that in perspective, in the United States, a population of 320 million, we have 700,000 physicians. In India, a population of 1.2 billion people, 43% don't have toilets, 65% have mobile phones, but there are only 700,000 physicians in India. If you look at that and compare it to the United States, there are the same amount of physicians in India that we have in the United States, and we have 1/4 the population. So my point is, we can't innovate to expedite the resolution of that 1 billion problem, but we can integrate. We can bring technology that will have a capacity to reach millions and millions of people. I recently have come up, and I think this is why my philosophy on innovation has changed, that to me innovation is also about speed. What amazed me about Mark Zuckerberg and what he did with Facebook, and I know that you had the twins who were feeling that he stole the idea. I don't think he stole anything. I think what he did was he brought speed to the idea. And so innovation without integration and without speed is to me a casualty. Innovation with integration and with speed has the ability to change and have sustainable change. And so in the example I gave you about the 1 billion, yeah, we can innovate a new idea, but I think it's going to take too long and we'll never solve the 1 billion problem. But sometimes innovation is about knowing how to integrate. And to me, that's where I think my definition has morphed. I have been an innovator of something new. I've had that experience. But my last 10 years has been more about recognizing the value of integration. So I mentioned the ability to understand how to integrate, the ability to understand how to collaborate. And then I think the other, what I would say is speed. And I go back to, the Facebook example. That I never, even after watching, I forget the name of the movie. What was the name of the movie? The Zuckerberg. I never forget leaving that movie and saying this was all about speed. If I had a nickel for every time somebody said to me, oh, we thought of that idea that you just did. I opened up, in addition to my healthcare commitment, I've started 2 not-for-profits, and I've started 2 restaurants and a 16-room inn. And the one restaurant has taken off tremendously. In fact, it probably has franchisable qualities to it. But if I had a nickel for every time somebody said, I thought of doing this, you didn't do it. And so thought doesn't equate to completing the circle on innovation. You have to have speed. You have to move quickly, because what happens if you look at market-driven innovation is that you come out and you innovate, and somebody else there is watching you, and they out-innovate you, and then so it's a constant. You've got to constantly be ahead of the curve, and you have to constantly have speed. And so every year I look at my restaurant, or I look at my business, and I'll ask myself, what has to change? So case in point, at the restaurant this year, we never had a bar. And so I said to them, we have to get a bar in here because somebody else is gonna open up something like this with a bar. And sure enough, somebody came in a few weeks ago and said, that's the one thing I thought about that you were missing. And so you have to constantly, not only drive speed, but you have to constantly understand that today, things don't last forever. That you have to base your innovative idea on a set of assumptions you have in front of you today. And those assumptions don't last, in my mind, more than 4 to 6 months. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be clever. And that's the difference between, I think, 30, 40 years ago. You could develop things 40 years ago, and it probably stood the test of time for about 20 years. I don't think that that's the case today, is that there is a lot of speed because of technology, speed of communication. I remember the news being only 15 minutes. Now you have 24/7 news. And so there's a lot of activity going on. And so I think the next generation will have to operate under a speed that is much greater than what we've had to operate under. I think the biggest challenge is your lack of understanding the value of collaborative IQ. Mm-hmm. That I think you get so wrapped up. I'll give you a great story. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was speaking at a university in Switzerland. It was a technology university. And there were maybe 500 students there. And I had asked, how many in this room want to be known as an innovator? Everybody raised their hand. Then I asked, how many want to be known as an integrator? 2 people raised their hands. And so I think what's happened is that innovators develop for who and what they know. They don't get into the minds of the end user. This is why electronic health records did not take off, because those who were innovating did not know the minds of physicians. And that's where collaborative IQ has to come in. You have to really understand not just the problem that you're solving, but you have to really understand the individuals who are going to be responsible for using whatever you're innovating. Mm-hmm. And that's where collaborative IQ comes in. Being able to have a sense of you're wanting to have breakthrough ideas, but being able to modify, being able to have enough room, enough leeway where the end user can come in and take it down that last mile. And if you don't do that, I mean, look at right now, we have more than 150,000 healthcare apps. There's 150,000 healthcare apps. Less than 10% are actually used. And I just went to a conference recently and they're saying probably 5 of those 150,000 are actually all you need. And so I think what Steve Jobs did, I think his kind of innovative bent, I think he promoted a lot of folks to get behind a computer or to go into a room and to just unleash their breakthrough thinking. What I think was lacking there was the EQ. That the IQ drives your breakthrough thinking. Mm-hmm. The emotional quotient drives the ability to make sure that it's going to be used, and used in a way that has the ability to solve the problem that you were setting out to solve. I think this is something, in fact, in the book that I will release this year, I talk about a very important fundamental that I've learned painfully, and that is most people get the content right. They understand what they want to do, but they forget about the processes, and they forget about the people. And you can't get anything done unless you have this connection with people. I have been fortunate that I know I'm tough and I have high demands. However, I've been very fortunate that I have very loyal people who are committed because they see in me this commitment to them. They see my loyalty to them. They see my passion. And so you can have the content right, but strategy can't follow content. Strategy's got to follow the content, the people, the process. You've got to get those 3 first, and then the strategy will follow. And I say that because you get ambassadors who believe in you, who will have to be the mouthpiece to how they communicate throughout the organization what it is that you're trying to drive. And sometimes you're not the best person to communicate that, but the people around you are able to get into your mind. And the Healthy Villages is a great example. The organization we founded in 2011. For 24 months I was talking about this, and James' partner was with me, and, somebody else was with me, and people said, oh, it's never gonna take off, don't do it, whenever they say that. By the way, that's also a great lesson. Whenever anyone tells you not to do it, do it. Because what they're doing is feeding into their own fears. And part of doing it is, you have no fears, you just go and do it. But there was a great example of people around me were able to get into my brain and take this 60,000-foot idea and bring it into something that could be distilled. And so the content was there, but without process and without people, you won't get much done. And I've learned painfully, I think many years ago, I would have started off with strategy first, and I did, and I failed. In the years now where I have started off with, and it takes a little bit longer, but it's more sustainable, where I get the content, the people, and the process, and then I add the strategy, I've been much more successful. I think two things. I think nobody cares what you do until they know what your passion is. And I think that you have to have passion. You have to have a belief. I think Steve Jobs said it in one of his books, passion can move the world. And that's one accusation that I have been accused of, and I love it when they say you're just, wow, you're passionate. You have to be, in many respects, the catalyst for change. And the catalyst for change is not just words. It's the energy that you apply to it. And so I would say for anyone who is going to innovate is that most ideas, if I were to come into this room today and I were to say to you, I have an idea that I want, you get my point. You have to put that energy and that belief in it, that you're willing to march, into, war to advance. I am committed to my Healthy Villages because I find it absolutely appalling that we could actually have 1 billion people who die prematurely because they don't have access to a healthcare worker. To me, that is not fair. So people have to see your passion before they know what it is that you really want to do in terms of innovation. And I have always started off with my passion. I don't care whether it's going to my restaurant. You'll see me, when people walk up, I'll speak in Italian, and they think that that's all I do in my life, is that I own a restaurant. That's fine. I'm okay with that. But then I can transition to my foundation when I'm in, Africa, as I was 2 months ago, opening up this maternity ward and picking up the babies and, showing them that I really care, to moving from that and going off and speaking at a, Nashville TED Talk. Whatever you do it with the highest degree of passion, because that is what will move people to want to follow you, to want to believe in you, and to want to work with you. So as I shared with you, Healthy Villages was founded to address a sincere problem that I think is plaguing us right now, and that is healthcare access. That here we are in 2016, and we still have close to 15% of the world's population that don't have access to healthcare. And so Healthy Villages was an opportunity to integrate everything that I had shared with you today, to integrate what we already had developed. I knew that we didn't have to develop anything else, so I brought the medical app from the company that I founded, Physicians Interactive, and brought it over to Healthy Villages. And then I was true on my promise that I did not want to develop a 100-employee foundation, that we should collaborate with organizations that already have the infrastructure. So Healthy Villages only employs 4 people. It's always amazing when I tell people that. We only employ 4 people. But we have driven forward this notion of collaborative IQ. So in East Africa, a community of 45,000 villagers, a village by the name of Lawala. In 2012, 100 babies per 1,000 births died. Less than 25% of the pregnant mothers delivered their babies in a safe environment. In fact, they died on the way to the community health center. They died in the wheelbarrows. They were bringing them in wheelbarrows on these ditches. And so we brought our mobile app into the community, and then we partnered with not doctors and nurses, because there's not enough doctors and nurses there. We partnered with the local villagers. Just because you are poor doesn't mean you don't have an intellect. And so we showed them how to turn the tablet on, and then we downloaded the tablet with a pregnancy app. And they were the ones who were able to identify in the community who was expecting a baby. And then we learned about the wheelbarrow, and we said, fine, we'll buy a SUV for you. And then we learned that they had no cell tower, so when they turned this on, they couldn't communicate, and so we called Vodafone up. All collaboration, integration, right? We didn't invent it, we called people, we brought it together. Today, here are the results. Infant mortality is 30 deaths per 100 births. 70 more babies are alive today because of Healthy Villages. Close to 98% of the mothers now deliver their babies in a community health center. Remember, 5 years ago, less than 25% did it, and so the mothers and babies both died. That is terrific, and we just opened up a maternity ward because when I was there 2.5 years ago, in a room half this size, a dozen mothers were on the floor, cement floors, delivering babies. No woman should have to go through something like that. And so Healthy Villages means heal the villages. To do what fate hasn't done, we bring this collaborative and this supportive mechanism. And so we've done this in Haiti, we've done this in Africa, we've done this in China, Louisiana, in Maine, in Franklin County, in Nashville. And so Healthy Villages has become an international not-for-profit organization